President's Choice chef's knife. In the middle of doing some edge retention work on cardboard. Finished a run. The edge is below 5% of optimal sharpness, so it's relatively dull. So it has trouble getting into a cut. Anyway, you can see it's relatively dull. This is a standard clay brick. All I've done is soak this for about 10 minutes. Then I've ground the edges down by grinding it against another brick. And I've ground the surface of two bricks together, just again to even it out and get all the dirt and the grime off it. Now, the surface of this is really irregular, so you want to take a bit more care. You can't go as maniacal as I was before. Now, I want to stop, check, and make sure that I'm actually abrading metal off the edge. Seems to be working just fine. Tip could use a bit more work. Still reflecting light. So, the edge is now not reflecting light, so I know I have it back to the proper shape. Now I want to try to refine the apex. Refining the apex is going to be rather difficult on this stone because clay bricks are generally only about 20 to 30% alumina, which is what you want in a sharpening abrasive. It's actually what most ceramic sharpening stones are made out of. The rest of it is softer materials. Silicon dioxide is one of the other major components, which is hard enough to abrade most steels, but not hard enough to cut the carbides. So, going very light, and this is sort of the difficult part because there's no sieve used to sort out these particles. There are very many different sizes. You can feel the larger ones biting into the edge, so you want to go very lightly. And now I'll cross over the scratch pattern, try to refine it. And because I'm going light, I'm doing more strokes than I normally would. Because again, only a small amount of this stone is actually quality abrasive. The other thing you'll feel if you do this is that the surface of the stone is a lot slipperier. It's not biting aggressively into the edge of the knife, and again that's because it doesn't have the right consistency, obviously, that you would want in a sharpening stone, because again it's not designed to be that. It's designed to be a structural brick. So it's about enough. Now I'll elevate the angle and be really careful and really light. And now I'll back sharpen that off. And now I'll cross over the grit pattern again once more. And now the finish. Now, I said before I always want to finish with the knife like this. That's because the position of the knife on the stone is what actually creates a scratch pattern that you put on the knife. So when I have the knife like this, the stone is cutting scratches this way into the edge of the knife. That means the roughness or the micro teeth on the knife are actually pointed back this way. So when I do a draw cut like this, the teeth will very aggressively bite into the material. If I have the knife like this on the stone, the teeth will actually be flat, straight out like this, which means I won't get that extremely high aggression. But the good thing about having a knife where the teeth are straight is that it will cut just as aggressively pushing away from you as it will pulling towards you. But in general, if you think about how you use a knife most of the time that you're cutting from the heel to the tip. You're very rarely taking the knife and starting a cut out by the tip and pushing it towards the heel. So in general, having your knife like this gives the optimal scratch pattern for aggression. Anyway, that should be good enough. Stop yammering about. Now, one of the things I noticed, or I said a couple of times to people, when they're cutting paper, they should turn the paper 90 degrees. One of the reasons why, paper has a grain, all materials do, of this nature. You can see it tears very easily like that. It doesn't tear the other way. Not nearly as easy. See what happens? So you tear along the grain, you'll get a uniform straight line, because the grain is splitting. If you try to go across it, that's what happens. So when you're cutting with a knife and you're trying to demonstrate a high degree of sharpness, you wouldn't be cutting like this, that's going with the grain. You cut across the grain like that, which demonstrates that the knife is sharper than if it can go with the grain. And that's one of the reasons why, if you see someone doing tests of sharpness, often the knife will cut the paper one way, then turn the paper a little bit, and the knife will rip the paper. That's because it's not sharp enough to do a cut across the grain. But again, that's a knife that you can see was very dull at the start. It only takes very little effort on this, which is obviously not an abrasive made to sharpen knives. And again, I did very little prep to this. This is what it looked like originally with no prep. You can see the edges are of course beat up. So soak this for around 10 minutes, grind the edges against another brick, grind the two surfaces together, and then it's perfectly fine. The reason why you grind the edges down is because if you're trying to sharpen, you can catch the edge of the knife in this very jagged edge of the brick, and of course it'll scrape it all off, the same as you can catch it on the end, and that can destroy your edges. And that's a very similar procedure that you'll find people doing on regular water stones, just grinding the edges down. And it, again, it just protects the knife edge from grating over a very rough surface. So that's all it takes. You can usually find these banging around. They're not very expensive. You actually go out and buy a new one, but there's no reason why. I mean, it's very easy to pick up these. People throw them out all the time. You can find them all over the place on construction sites. They're usually thrown out. So that's it. Again, just another demonstration that you do not need ultra fine grits to get a knife that's capable of obliterating newsprint. You do not need really high quality stones. You just need a relatively basic understanding of what sharpening is and the difference between shaping an edge and actually sharpening the apex are two relatively different things. They're done with different levels of care. You have different objectives in both. Again, I'm not saying that instead of getting a decent stone, you start using bricks. I'm just saying that you can if you need. And now if I replace this with a really nice stone, like a decent 1000 grit water stone, like this, which is a relatively nice 1000 grit water stone, well, if I was to sharpen on this, I'm not going to be doing as much, okay, I got to cross over my grits, now I got to increase my angle, now I got to cross my grits over again, because this stone, where it's very uniform, where it has an excellent consistency, I don't need to do any of that, because the burr formation on this will be minimal. And the other thing is I can go a lot faster on this, because I don't need to worry about hitting a rough part on the stone and tearing my edge apart. Don't need to be doing any of that, so I can get the shaping done very fast. And it's only like a few, I mean it's 3 to 4 strokes, and I got the apex done. So Nice stones do have their advantages. They will speed the process up significantly. But the fundamentals are the same whether you're using a relatively high-end stone or a brick. And this easily shaves, of course. Very easily.